So appreciate getting up sort of early. So we did it at this time exactly because tends to work for even Pacific, if you're really interested, and all the way to maybe further to the Orient. Some people can join as well. So it's fine we can get started. Essentially, this AMA is limited to 50 people maximum. That's the people we send the invitation to. And why? Basically, we didn't know how many people would show up. We didn't know how many questions, how long it would take to answer questions. So we wanted to try it first with 50 people, have a sort of channel, a way to connect with students besides, obviously the academy is all video-based training. And so in a way, you're sort of part of a experiment. In a way, we're trying to see, what would make sense going forward. But it was also, at the time we launched the academy, we wanted to sort of reward in some way the first people who kind of supported the academy and joined the first course, which was Team Topologies Distilled. So you are one of those 50 people. So now we actually have more courses. This is not a sales speech at all, but we have published another course, Platform as a Product, and then we have a bundle of the both. So if you happen, so I imagine well, I know Alex, you've done both. If someone has done Team Topologies Distilled and they want to try the bundle, you can send us an email and we can give you a discount code, so you only pay the difference, right? Instead of buying the whole bundle again. Anyway, so there will be more courses coming. It actually is kind of a little bit lengthy process to get the course published. It's a little bit waterfallish, to be honest, just because of the nature of recording, editing, etc. There should be one more course coming this year, and then next year there will be more, and we'll start having guest courses as well. So people who will talk about other things outside of Team Topologies, but with a strong correlation or some overlap, right? So for example, Team Topologies and domain-driven design. So that's kind of the direction, one of the directions the Academy is going next year. Plus we'll start having with another course that we're publishing, we'll start having sort of tracks, right? So for different kinds of roles. So people in platform would be looking at that track. People who are more in management would be looking at that track. Anyway, those are things, if you follow us on social media or if you signed up to get news from the Academy, you'll find out in due time. So let's get to the AMA then. Just some basic ground rules for us to be in sync. I mean, we're quite few, so I think this is more of a conversation, but if more people would join, then we need to, ask one question at a time. Well, first mute yourself if you're not talking, ask one question at a time. So you let other people ask questions, and then we can come back to another question that you might have later on. Feel free to use the chat for comments, be respectful of others, and enjoy. If you're not enjoying, or if you have to leave, that's obviously absolutely fine. How to ask questions? Really, we're only a few people, so you can just unmute yourself and ask the question. If we would be more people, I would ask them to use the raise hand option, just so we could keep track more easily. And that's it, basically. So the format's pretty free. Just ask us questions, or if you have any comments, and we'll take it from there.
Alex, we know that you've got a whole bunch of questions because you put them on Twitter. Yeah. So if you fancy opening with one of yours, then we'll get at least one of them done.
Sure. I would say I have several ones. One of the things that I started in the company was about the streamlined teams, and one of the problematics that we had back then were that in order to deploy a feature to production, it had to go with 3 different teams, one from mobile, one from backend, and one from frontend. The approach that I took then was to try to put the people and the skills inside the team. Somehow it's broken the law of long life teams, because we kind of merged them, and it causes the trust between the team members decreased. And I'm wondering which the approach that you would like to take, because if we had 3 different teams, they 3 taking the same boundary. One approach was bringing everything to one team and train them on all the skills. It causes some team members to leave because of new ways of working. So I would like to know how streamlined teams without handovers and long-lived teams that you suggest to not break so the trust is there. How do you combine the things? Because it somehow causes a sensation of, well, things are changing so rapidly, moving around. So we have full stack teams or multidisciplinary teams. How that works when you introduce that kind of strong change within the organization?
It's a really good question. So there's a few different things there. So if we go back to some team topologies principles, then one of the key principles is we want to build high trust and evolve high trust within the team over time, because that enables us to go quickly. At the same time, we need to limit team cognitive load. So if you think about it, one of the reasons we talk about a platform team topology is because at some point, there's simply too many things to think about. The stack is too big. And so then by thinking, well, what's an effective lower limit of the stuff this team needs to think about? And then that enables the team to own some of the things. So if we take this to the extreme and say, hey, you need to understand, front end, mobile, back end, databases, infrastructure, power generation. I mean, it gets silly. There's no way that a team, in theory, if they knew all that stuff, they could go really, really quickly. But in practice, they don't, because we've got a limit on the cognitive load. So it's a trade-off here. It's a trade-off between what can a team, what would we need to have a fast flow change, and balance that between the kind of cognitive load that is going to be needed. So some of the approaches might be, can we find in the case of, say, mobile and web and backend, can we find a toolkit or an approach that does kind of cross-compilation of code? So you've got one set of code that you're writing and you compile it down into mobile and compile it down into web, and deliberately choose an approach like that, where you are you're leaning on the technology to help you avoid the need for people to understand all the depth. That might be one choice, but you might also choose to keep the teams somewhat separate, but have them work really, really closely together. So like a pair of teams, something like this. There's an example in the Team Topologies book where there's a pair of teams working together on a kind of an ongoing basis. And that seems to work okay, because you've got, what, 7, 8 people in each team, a total of 15 people in a pair of teams. And so that's still around that Dunbar's number, one of the Dunbar numbers, 15 people, just like a sports team. There's no more than 15 people on the field in a sports team typically. And again, that's the reason, is because you want that high trust. So there's some trade-offs here that that we might need to make.
Yeah, and I think from a practical point of view, the situation you described could be one approach. It sounds like maybe the expectations around what this approach requires were not set correctly, because for the reasons Matthew was saying, if you bring people together in a team, you have to expect that it's going to take time for them to first kind of gel as a team, but also because you're bringing in different skills. How do you get the overall team to kind of have the sort of a baseline understanding of these multiple skills, or to use, some techniques like Matthew said that ease how much you need to know if we're talking about mobile, front end, etc. So it might have been a situation where when you take that approach, should have been expected, that it's going to be, the delivery is going to slow down actually for a period of time as the team gels. People are going to have to invest a lot more in learning different skills for a period of time than actually trying to produce software when you don't really have a strong team yet. And so that approach is a bit difficult. And if you don't set the right expectations, how long this is going to take, and there will be a period where we're going to slow down, we're not actually going to accelerate, then yes, of course, there's going to be backlash, and some people might be demotivated. And so maybe another approach could have been more in the line of thinking, okay, what, like Matthew said, what teams do we need? We want this streamlined team for this business stream of work, but then we're probably still going to need some sort of mobile type of platform, and maybe some other things that will help this team. And so if you had two teams initially, perhaps you could pair them so they're working together for a period of time, or you could also try that they have some collaboration so that you start sort of moving the responsibilities from one team to another, and perhaps some people will move as well, and the other team might become more of a platform team, right? But you sort of need to have that thinking in place. Like, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to have a period where these two teams that are now separate are going to collaborate to sort of clarify responsibilities? What is the responsibility of streamlined team? What is the responsibility of platform team? Or the approach you took was like merge the teams, but then we need to expect at least 6 months to actually maybe get back to the rhythm we had before of delivery.
Yeah, indeed, we are after the 6 months, and now we're getting the rewards. Now we're going faster. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we lose people on the track. That was the thing that I wanted to avoid. But now the teams are stronger, and they are more cohesive, and they understand more the product that we are doing. So it's true that some people left more like, I want to work only in backend and that's it kind of situation. But some people adapted well, and we did trainings inside. Like, you'll need to learn React, so we do training, and some people bought the idea. And these people now we have I'm quite proud of the team right now. So yeah, you said like 6 months, it's reasonable. And yeah, we are in that track. So good.
Yeah, sometimes happens. Some people just don't want to work in this sort of approach, and it's not really much you can do other than see if they're a good fit for another type of team. Maybe someone who wants to become really a deep expert in, let's say, backend or Kubernetes or whatever, probably is a better fit either for enabling team or platform team.
Or possibly complicated subsystem, because they might then just work in that one particular area. But you might have to accept a small number of people just saying, this way of working is not for me, which is fine. Some people like to sit in a corner and kind of tinker away and build stuff. That's kind of fine. But what we need is people who are almost obsessed about a fast flow of change and thinking about these dynamics between the teams and really focused on the customer, these kind of things, as well as being great, engineers and technologists and so on. This book is actually really useful here. It's called Dynamic Reteaming. And this can help. So this is the second edition. This is from Heidi Helfen. This can help with thinking about how to change teams and make. Let me get a link for it. Dynamic reteaming. I'll send it out Amazon.
Yeah,
link.
Make sure to get the edition that looks like that, because there was a first edition, and then O'Reilly sort of bought the rights, and they've changed a lot in the second edition.
So basically, if you're going to change the teams, make sure you're doing it in a way which is kind of considered and thoughtful and based on some useful kind of principles and things from. I mean, this is the book that talks about changing teams right now. So this is a really good place to start.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions?
You know,
Let's go around. Yeah.
My company is a services organization. We're a consultancy in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have a wide range of exposure to businesses that are just struggling to understand and to approach, you know, more of a modern product development approach and organizational design. At a grassroots level, as a consultancy, we have initiatives internally where we're developing programs for our clients. And just at a base level, kind of a grassroots level, Team Topologies has really given us lenses to look through to establish sanity for ourselves in these different environments, to be diagnostic and opinionated about what organizations could do. So as opposed to being part of a product company, being in consultancy, I was wondering if you could speak. The most popular question I got from folks as I was approaching this meeting was, how do we talk to organizations about this? How do we get the conversation started? How do we look at current state today, look at current state tomorrow, and how does it get there? So do you start with a platform team? Do you start in an isolated area of an organization where there's like a limited blast radius? Or just kind of curious to hear your thoughts there.
That's a good question. Have you seen the infographics on our website? Possibly not. It sounds like, which is fine. So let me dig those out now. Infographics. Whoops. Infographics. Infographics coming up. Infographics. I can never spell the word infographics. For some reason, my fingers always add an extra. Oh, there we go. So they're fully shareable.
I'm also pasting we have shapes for the teams that you can use.
Yeah.
So they're available on a number of different tools, but obviously that's just, you know, to make it easier to talk about and create diagrams.
I think one place to start really is to get people aligned around the idea of fast flow, because we've been doing some work with the customer in Europe recently in the telecom sector. And some of the people on those workshop sessions found it really challenging, the idea that they needed to actually extend the remit of these teams so that it was build and run. But I think in that particular organization, they've got a real challenge about dealing with what they call IT operations, people running these systems. And there was some pushback saying, oh, well, you actually need to make sure this is kind of properly end-to-end. These people need to be seeing how their application is running. But to really explore the value of fast flow and the value of this kind of end-to-end ownership. Because of course, it's not just getting new stuff out of the door, it's being able to respond rapidly to zero-day vulnerabilities, or to changes in legislation, or to sudden, like a U-turn, do you call it? Does that translate? A sudden change in direction that was not really expected, and suddenly, within the space of a single day, we need to put something out there that's substantially different. And this ability to make these kind of changes in the software system services that we're running just becomes pretty fundamental to being perceived as responsive by customers. And so getting some alignment around the value of fast flow in multiple areas. People are more engaged. We have less to think about, so we're not context switching all the time, and so on and so on. Now, fast flow is not applicable in every single area. Things like research and development, R&D, true R&D around, engineering and pharmaceuticals and healthcare and things. Possibly, fast flow is not really relevant in that area. There's some debate that it's partly relevant, but maybe it's less relevant. But when we're talking about kind of business services, certainly, or citizen-facing services in a government context, then fast flow gives us this rapid feedback and allows us to kind of sense what's happening. And so it's substantially relevant in large part. It's just that some people, I think, are quite challenged by it. So it could be worth kind of working on some materials and some ways of talking about it. This is standard DevOps stuff, right? This goes back nearly 15 years now, so it's nothing particularly new. by just putting there's still a lot of people that we come across who seem to think that, who don't seem to see the full value in getting, in us being able to releasing very, very rapidly, getting feedback very rapidly, being able to change, kind of course correct. So getting some awareness around that. Lots of stuff flows from that acceptance that fast flow is a good thing, I think is how I'd say it.
Yeah, I quite like this. I can share very briefly. In terms of kind of extending responsibilities of streamlined teams and thinking about responsibilities, because we still see very often organizations that are talking about fast flow, but then you look at the teams and they're really kind of just traditional development teams. So John Cutler, if you're familiar with his work, I like how he talks about this, like the responsibility of teams, if you want streamlined teams, would correspond here to the bottom, sort of these product teams with really understanding of the business, of the opportunities, of what should we experiment and work on, all the way to actually running the service or the product they're responsible for. So I think this speaks also to the challenge of doing this, but again, it needs to be an evolutionary approach. You won't get there. You won't get from this here on the top to the bottom in a short time frame. So what Matthew said, first raising awareness that we need fast flow to actually be able to respond much faster to customers and to problems and to changes is the first step. There's also an interesting talk that I'm going to paste now in the chat, because you said you are a services consulting company. There's a consulting company in Norway where they apply team topologies to the whole organization. So they apply the types of teams to, for example, to sales, marketing, even to leadership, because they felt the principles and the patterns made sense, not just in technology. So that might be interesting for you specifically, since you're also in a consulting business, and might also provide some, examples to your clients to show, look, we're even applying this internally.
One of the obvious patterns that you can apply as a consulting company is the enabling team pattern, precisely because enabling teams, certainly the interactions between the enabling team and the streamlined team are temporary. The enabling team itself might be around for a long time or might not, but we'd expect them to be facilitating that streamlined team only for a couple of days or a few weeks, certainly not months. In terms of the relationship between the enabling team and that specific streamlined team, we don't want it going on for months because it becomes a crutch, it becomes a support. We want the streamlined team to be independent. But then, of course, consulting companies, you've seen experience in lots of different places. I mean, I'm speaking as someone who does consulting myself. We can bring that experience together, go into one organization, help them for a period of weeks or months or whatever, and explicitly act in that enabling team way, where we've got people who understand how to mentor and coach members in the streamlined team. So we're not doing the work for them. We are being measured on how effectively we improve the delivery performance of the streamlined team. So it needs a bit more of it needs a bit of creativity around the commercial contract and trust to make it work, but it can be really powerful. And you're really using the outside expertise in a really, really good way, which is that you're boosting, you're lifting up these internal teams. So that's one thing that we've started to see with some consulting companies around the world, is explicitly talking about enabling team as the way that they're going to behave or run during an engagement.
That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Eric with a K or Eric with a C, you have a question?
I do have a question that builds on both of the previous questions. And to just slight context here, for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been working as a coach instead of a manager. So I'm playing the influence without authority game. And in my organization, we tend to take a platform first approach where, I have a web platform, a mobile platform, and we're going to build a new capability and ship an SDK, and our teams that are actually building the apps will then consume it. And it takes forever to work that way. And in my experience, when I was an engineering manager, I always like to extract the SDK or the API from a working app. And the pattern that I found in the book that is really the basic thing is discover, establish, use. And I'm having a tough time getting the people with the authority in those 3 different verticals, the mobile platform, the web platform, and the app, to agree to do even small experiment on it. And I keep talking about fast flow and think big, work small, learn fast, all that good stuff. And I just haven't gotten the experiment crafted because people are too busy thinking, oh, we're so late on this program, we've got to just put our heads down and keep cranking. How do you break a pattern like that with the tools that you've got here in the book and the patterns?
That's a really good question. I mean, the way you can start is by, I think there's a couple of different things. One is the word platform is a bit problematic. We kind of didn't want to use the word platform in the book. We ended up using it, but it means lots of different things. So in this particular case, really look and see whether your mobile platform is really a platform in a team topology sense. I think parts of it might be if you treated it in a certain way, but I often the mobile platform is not really a platform, it's something else. That said, when you discover bits inside the organization or groups that do seem to be providing a team topology style platform, in other words, the focus should be on reducing cognitive load of the teams that are using it and enabling fast flow, then have a look at the metrics and the incentives of people inside that platform. What are the incentives? Are the incentives to kind of build out a huge bit of technology, or are the incentives, are the people inside that platform group actually measured on how much acceleration they're offering to the teams that use it? So look for ways like that to change some behaviors, I think, is where I would start.
Yeah, we are stuck in local optimization.
Yeah, I think part of your work, which I know it's not easy, is to highlight the small wins, the situations where you actually have self-service, you actually have separation of missions, right? So the platform team is working on what are the capabilities, and the app team is actually working on the business functionality, because it sounds like maybe some of the platform teams, or some of the time or most of the time, are actually working on a dependency that the app has, right? So that's a dependency in the execution of the work, and therefore you have the long wait times. So whenever you have good examples where actually this is really self-service and this helped teams, the app teams go much faster. Or what also happens sometimes is the app teams or development teams, if you like, tend to try to avoid the platform because they know it's going to take longer than if they just do it themselves, which can improve the flow for that team, but can also lead to then problems of reliability, performance, etc. So there's no kind of simple answer, obviously. One other thing that you can try, so we have a number of simple tools and templates on GitHub. I don't know if people have seen that. One of them is Team Dependencies Tracker, right? This might be an easier sell, so I'll put it here. This might be an easier sell with some teams, which is saying, let's just start, we don't have to change the way we work. Let's just start tracking which dependencies we have on other teams and which ones are blocking us, meaning we have to wait for other teams to do things, and which ones are sort of healthy. so that you can start having some awareness of that as well across teams and across management, hopefully. A good platform team should be thinking or should be asking, how many times have we been a blocking dependency to others? They would proactively reach out and ask and find out where they're actually becoming a blocker. But that's another option to consider, to try getting visibility on, teams have all these dependencies, and this is where time is being wasted.
Yeah, if I can just,
so I go, Eric, tell me.
Yeah, just following up briefly on that, we're all aware of that, but seemingly paralyzed by organizational boundaries to what to do about it. And there's reorg fatigue, and you couldn't reorg across those org boundaries very easily anyway. And so I've been trying to sell the idea of let's instead dynamically adjust the way that teams interact. So, again, that discover, establish, use pattern. I could, without changing the team structures, say, why don't you guys work together to figure out the exact details of the SDK and make it work, and then pull away and be more hands off. But there's just such a political headwind.
Yeah, it's not easy.
I think it's worth saying that from a team topologies perspective, it depends what platform first means. But from a team topologies perspective, I think it's worth thinking about stream-aligned team first, because fundamentally what we want is multiple independent decoupled streams of change. That's what we're aiming for, and the architecture to go with it. We know that kind of architecture, decoupled, asynchronous messages, we know that architecture scales massively. The industry, people in the industry have known this since the 1960s. This is not new. That's the architecture approach which properly scales. And so fundamentally, the architectural approach that we need from an organization level is multiple independent decoupled teams that communicate asynchronously, that are not coupled to the same release cadence. That's a really important thing, and it's why things like SAFe basically don't work in a modern context, because they have this planning interval coupling. Anyway, that's a whole separate discussion. And so start with the streamlined teams, and we say, what would it take for this team to own this thing independently? What kind of stuff would we need? And if they can take that on, at least for a period of time, and they're happy to do so, happy and what am I saying? So if the team, including the product person with the budget, is happy to take on all of that stuff to enable them to be independent, then that's a good thing. Just because there might be some duplication there, it shouldn't matter, because if that means that the product can evolve really, really quickly, then that's just a price that that person in charge of that product P&L is happy to pay, basically. And basically leave it, it's almost like platform last rather than platform first. It's like, let's work out how these things could be independent, and only actually put in a platform when we're really sure what the right kind of dynamics are with the technology estate that we have, or as the technology are evolving. I know it doesn't always mean that, and at scale we kind of get the sense in which we're going to need a platform at some point, just because we've got the experience in the industry. But at the very least, taking the time to think, just to catch ourselves and say, well, maybe we don't need all of these teams to use this platform or to use a platform. Maybe they can be independent and allow for that kind of that decoupled execution, and be happy with some level of kind of duplication and similarity, because we're optimizing for fast flow. So it's not necessarily platform last, but I think taking the time to really interrogate ourselves and ask that question, what's actually really needed? What's the minimum needed? This is the thinnest viable platform, right? What's the minimum needed to enable these teams to be independent and have a fast flow of change? And just hold back on trying to build a great big all-encompassing platform.
In opposition to largest possible platform, which is what happens sometimes.
There's a good case study that's on the website, an example from USwitch, where they started as very, very independent streamlined teams. only at a certain point when they actually tracked the metrics did they decide to put in a platform. And because of the way that they did that, it gave them real insights into kind of into how to build that platform. They built the platform they built was optional to use, so no team was forced to use it. All of these kind of really, really good dynamics, which are, it's almost like the kind of perfect way of introducing a platform from this kind of perspective with cognitive load and fast flow and so on.
Well, you validated my mental model, and I think I just, my takeaway is I need to keep trying to find the one place where I could do the experiment that would kind of open up the eyes of those executives to the value of fast flow.
Yeah. Eric with a C.
Yeah. So I'd like
Good to see you, Eric.
Talk about,
it's been a while.
Yes, good to see you. This is great. Thanks. So I wanted to, I had a question about metrics, and you just, talked a little bit, Matthew, about metrics. And so I really find that like going into organizations and being part of leading a change and helping with a mindset is defining a handful of metrics ahead of time is really helpful to help guide the change, and then articulating the value. So the question here is, are there any metrics that you particularly like and recommend with team topology for organizations to articulate the value, and help guide the adoption? I will throw out certainly, like lead time. I always, like lead time for it. That's very helpful. And it's one that can't be gamed as easily as, say, velocity or something. So what metrics do you favor?
I've got some ideas. Manuel, have you got some in your head?
Well, we obviously recommend the Accelerate metrics from the Accelerate book for streamlined teams. So that's lead time, deployment frequency, mean time to restore, and change failure rate. With some clients, I don't particularly, stick to those specific metrics, because I think what really they're talking about is some measure of speed, some measure of reliability and ability to recover from problems, and some measure of quality, right? You want those three to be sort of balanced, right? So because when we're talking about fast flow, we're not talking about let's deploy as quickly as we can without, and break things willy-nilly, or so we're talking about finding a good kind of balance between speed, quality, and reliability. So for streamlined teams, those are a good start. So the good thing is the Accelerate book is based on research, has been very well accepted. So it tends to be sort of easy to talk about now these days. There used to be huge discussions about metrics in the past, and that's very beneficial that we can agree these 4 metrics are meaningful. The question starts then when we're looking at other types of teams, platform teams, enabling teams, where for the platform teams, you can look at Accelerate metrics, but probably that's not the most important to start with, because of the patterns we talk about around listening to your customers and focus on reducing cognitive load, etc. So we usually recommend for platform teams to start with user satisfaction. Just ask the people in the organization how they feel about platform. Adoption metrics, so assuming the platform is optional, the services in the platform are optional, or at least some of them. Look at, are teams using them or not? Why are they not using it? So we can drive discovery of what do we need to do next. And then you can look at the Accelerate metrics for platform teams, like how quickly can we deliver new functionality and value in the platform. At some point that's important, but I wouldn't start there. And then for enabling teams, I would say that's maybe the hardest, because it's where you're helping improve the capabilities of the teams of the organization, and it's hard to measure that specifically, overall, if you're looking at cognitive load of teams, it should go down and they should be able to do more, but it's hard to have very specific metrics for enabling teams. But it's, in some domains, it's possible. You can, for example, the metric for team helping with continuous delivery might be lead time for the other teams that are using the continuous delivery practices. That's my take. I don't know, Matthew, if you want to add.
An additional metric that I've found really insightful or really, it's like a laser metric, is actually flow efficiency. So this is the proportion of time that's actually, hey, a thumbs up from Eric. Okay, so flow efficiency, because lead time is all very well, but if we just focus on lead time and don't care about what kind of things are happening during that lead time, then we might be just wasting lots of time. We might be automating things where actually we've got a huge number of waiting states where teams are waiting on another team as part of the handoff. So actually flow efficiency is really easy to understand. The proportion of time we're actually spending doing real work rather than waiting for other teams. It helps to focus on the flow of work through the organization rather than keeping teams busy. Because some teams say, oh, well, I don't care if I'm waiting for another team, I'll just start the next thing. Yeah, but what's your WIP limit? What's your work in progress limit? That should be like really low for a team. The most should be 2 or 3 things inside a team that you're working on. That's it. And flow efficiency really shines a light on the dependencies. It helps people to focus on decoupling and kind of independent flows of change, because ideally flow efficiency should be heading towards 100. I mean, in lots of organizations, flow efficiency is 15%. 85% of the time is spent waiting on other teams, which is just unbelievable. I mean, it's believable, but it's kind of depressing. And of course, it actually speaks to, I had this realization the other day, it actually speaks to financial efficiency. Because if flow efficiency is at 15%, if most of the people in the organization are waiting on other people, that's not very effective from a financial perspective. So you can actually have a conversation with the CFO and say, look, our aim is not to directly improve financial efficiency by squeezing more work out of people. But if we do these things, we're expecting to see an improvement in the way in which people's time is being used. So you can potentially get some buy-in from the financial side of things as well by doing this. But you've got to be careful, because if you aim for that, you won't get it. It has to be a nice, happy outcome of optimizing for fast flow, that you will then you will improve flow efficiency because there's no handoffs in the flow of change. So yeah, the comment from Eric, low flow efficiency is bad for cognitive load. There's lots of waiting, distraction with context switching all the time. So yeah, that doesn't help either. Kind of demotivation, that kind of thing. So it's not the only thing, but it actually shines quite a strong light on lots of stuff, just flow efficiency, and it's a pretty straightforward thing. If you've got good tooling and deployment pipelines, sometimes the flow efficiency can be kind of extracted from that. Just looking at the metrics and things. Depends.
I just posted in the chat. So there's a book called Project to Product, same publisher, but it's just the books from IT Revolution are very complementary. So Project to Product, I think the most important idea is that moving to product-based teams and more independent, but it also provides a framework, if you like, for flow metrics. So they talk about flow efficiency and other metrics around flow, which can be useful. I'll agree with Matthew. I think flow efficiency is the key one that kind of highlights a lot of things, and it's almost like conversation starter. Like when you start to measure flow efficiency, and why is it 15% or 10%, or and then over time, as we're trying to improve, we're trying to improve the way platform teams work. We're trying to reduce dependencies between teams. Is flow efficiency going up or not? So it's kind of helps us validate. But the book Project Product is interesting. Actually, some people have been talking about Project to Product plus Team Topologies plus the Accelerate book as kind of a very complementary, consistent approach to whatever you want to call it, digital transformation, new operating models, all those things.
That's great. Thank you.
It's worth having a look at the 2021 State of DevOps report from Puppet as well. I've just put the link in the chat. We helped to contribute to that, but there's a whole load of research that they've done and pulled together, and that can help persuade some people of this kind of approach as well. I mean, you have to give your email to download it, but otherwise it's free.
Alex, I know you have about 20 more questions.
1,000 questions.
No, different situations. Yeah, I have two of them, which one is more, maybe you already answered that in the book, which is about organizational sensing. You talk about that, but I would like to understand more about what is the thing that you measure, but I think you already answered that about what you're measuring about organizational sensing. And the other, you can choose either one, which is, what are your feelings about inner sourcing, this kind of open source applied to companies, and how that affects between streamlined teams and platform teams? Because I think that this has been abused as a way to collaborate, but I would like to understand your takes. So I don't know, any of those two questions.
The inner sourcing one is relatively straightforward for me. It's so taking this kind of open source approach and bringing it inside the organization. Some changes are a little bit needed, but it relates to ownership and it relates to a fast flow of change. In the Topologies book, we recommend, each application or service has an owning team. There's no application or service which is just kind of sitting there floating around in maintenance mode and occasionally gets touched. Like a team owns, every single application or service is owned by one team. A team may own more than one if they're relatively small. But that does not mean that team has to do all the changes. If that team has the right kind of trust and the right kind of context and can specify the acceptance criteria for changes, then they can set up this kind of inner source thing, where other teams might then suggest a change into their system. And if that suggested change has all the right kind of tests and meets all the requirements and things, that can be a great way to get new ideas effectively. Just like open source in the public sphere is a great way of getting potentially amazing new ideas for the product. The key thing now is we have to be thinking about ownership. The team that is nominally owning that particular service actually has to be able to own it. They have to be able to say, no, we're not interested in that suggestion, pull request, whatever, because of these reasons. And we don't have the time or space or capacity to take that on right now. It's too big a change. It doesn't fit with the design principles of this thing. And there must be this sense in which they do properly own it, that change cannot be pushed onto that owning group. So that's where it might have been abused in the past, possibly that some people might have been basically forced to accept this kind of change. And then at that point, then they no longer own that system, not properly. They don't own it in the sense of actually being in control of what happens to that.
Yeah. Actually, this is an interesting area, and I'm hoping we will be able to publish a case study of a company where they've done this very successfully, the inner sourcing for the platform. Basically, something that started as, like Eric, you were mentioning, this something that was discovered in the application development, that they realized actually this could be sort of a platform, kind of organically grew, but then they never had a big platform team. So they strongly rely on inner sourcing to say, so that streamlined teams can add to the platform as long as they follow this sort of ground rules that the platform, they're almost like curators of platform. They almost don't do much development. At least that's what I talked with one of the persons in the platform there. So hopefully there will be a case study soon, because I think we need some more examples around this. But I think like Matthew says, it's a question about which dynamics are in place, and if you're actually looking at the good things of open source, or rather kind of finding a way to sneak things into the platform that are not really owned by the platform team. So I'll put in the chat just the probably have seen, so we have some industry examples. So whatever case studies we get, we publish there, and then we promote on social media as well. The question about the sense checking, Alex, in the book, I think we were talking mostly about what you should be looking for. What we've realized, I think, since the book came out is partially that you need some structure, some organizational structure who's looking at these things to some extent, right? It will be hard for individual teams to be aware of certain things that are happening, having the situational awareness across multiple teams. So probably you need some structure in the organization where their responsibility is mainly to be looking at sense checking, looking at, how do we enable flow across teams and things like that. So we've worked with organizations where they had, for example, very strong agile chapter. So the agile coaches formed a community and they had that sort of visibility. Many companies now have a sort of ways of working team or group, which part of their roles also probably looking at that, enabling flow.
But also you got roles like architect, which in the past they might have sat in an architect group and maybe reviewed changes or specified some things for teams to build. Well, if you think about the socio-technical system that we now know about, then someone with good kind of architect skills and ways of thinking through or being aware of multiple different dimensions, which is what a good architect will be thinking about, they can be thinking about flow. Are they an enabler of flow? They're using their architect experience to now think about the architecture of the organization and to help people understand about the value of thinking about the architecture of the organization, how that's actually affecting our ability to make meet business demand or meet user needs or whatever. And so they're thinking about multiple different dimensions, including the technology part, but not only the technology part anymore.
Maybe we have time for one or two questions. That's any pressing questions? No?
The other thing to mention, of course, is that an enabling team should explicitly expect to be sensing what's going on as they work with multiple streamlined teams. So if you have an enabling team that is focused on, I don't know, machine learning, and they're working with 10, 15, 20, 30 different streamlined teams to help them improve their machine learning awareness. As that enabling team works across multiple streamlined teams, it should explicitly be thinking, let's listen for the signals that tell us, do we have a missing capability across the organization as a whole? Is there a missing platform service that would make this stuff a lot easier? Do we need to hire more people? I don't know. They should be explicitly listening for these kind of things as they work across these different teams. That's the kind of internal sensing. I mean, the external sensing is because we've got teams end to end and very close to the customer or citizen. We're using government services. Teams very close to the customer or citizen means we can increase the empathy that we have for those kind of users and understand better what we need to build. So that's the kind of very basic product or service or market sensing that we get from precisely because the streamlined teams are much closer to the user or customer.
So we're almost, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it. Yep.
No, just going to say we're almost at the end. Would be great if you can give us feedback on this AMA, but obviously on anything around the Academy, around the book. So you can always send feedback to academy@teamtopologies.com. If you have any comments on this specific AMA, you like the format or you didn't like it, or was helpful or not, that would be great. If you have positive feedback, you can consider posting on social media. Just kidding. If you have any feedback you want to share on social media, that's fine. If you look for Team Topologies on Twitter or LinkedIn, that's our account. And